The Pentagon, one of the most important centers of intelligence and national security in the United States, was facing a challenge unlike any other. A highly complex foreign code had appeared, a string of numbers and letters so intricate that even the best and brightest minds in the intelligence community could not crack it. For months, teams of experienced codebreakers and computer experts had been working day and night, poring over every possible pattern, analyzing every piece of data, and using the most advanced technology available. Despite their best efforts, the code remained an unsolvable puzzle. The tension in the Pentagon was palpable. Every failed attempt increased the pressure on the analysts, who knew that the security of their nation could depend on solving this mystery. There were meetings after meetings, discussions filled with technical jargon, and countless strategies tested. Nothing seemed to work. It was as if the code was mocking the experts, laughing silently at their inability to unlock its secrets. The situation was more than just a professional challenge. It had become a matter of national pride. These were people who had spent years training in cryptography, mathematics, and computer science. They had cracked codes before, intercepted secret communications, and prevented disasters, yet here they were, stuck and frustrated. The Pentagon had allocated enormous resources, the most sophisticated computers, and teams of elite analysts who had achieved successes that ordinary people could only imagine. Still, the code remained a fortress, its patterns hidden, its meaning locked away. With each passing day, the urgency grew. Officials were nervous, knowing that other countries could gain an advantage if the code remained unbroken. Every failed attempt weighed heavily on the minds of the experts. Some began doubting their methods, while others started questioning whether the code was truly meant to be broken at all. The public, of course, had no idea what was happening behind the Pentagon's closed doors. News reports occasionally mentioned classified code challenges, or intelligence mysteries, but the gravity of the situation was far beyond what the headlines suggested. Inside the building, tension and anxiety were palpable. Experts who had once been confident now felt the creeping pressure of failure. They were highly skilled, dedicated, and disciplined, yet this challenge was humbling even to them. Despite all their experience, the code seemed almost alive, resisting every conventional approach. Some analysts worked late into the night, staring at endless lines of symbols, hoping to see a clue that no one else could. Others argued over theories, each more complex than the last, hoping that collaboration would finally yield a solution. Amid all this chaos, the Pentagon was a place of high stakes and high tension. Every small breakthrough or mistake mattered. The security of the nation, international relations, and even lives could be affected by what happened next. It was the kind of challenge that required not just intelligence but creativity, persistence, and a completely fresh perspective. The experts were doing everything they knew, yet they were facing a code that seemed almost impossible. The failure of the top minds left a void that no one expected could be filled in an unusual way, setting the stage for an unexpected hero. Little did anyone know, the answer to this unsolvable code would not come from the highly trained experts or the sophisticated machines designed to analyze it. The breakthrough would come from the most unlikely person, a young girl, the daughter of a janitor who worked at the Pentagon. While the experts struggled and the nation waited anxiously for a solution, she would stumble upon the mystery in the most ordinary of circumstances, during a simple break from her daily routine. Her story would challenge everyone's assumptions, showing that brilliance is not confined to titles, degrees, or experience. Sometimes, the key to the most complex problems comes from those who see the world differently, outside the rigid frameworks that experts often rely on. In that moment, the story of the Pentagon and its unsolved code was not just about intelligence or national security, it was about human curiosity, creativity, and the unexpected places where genius can appear. It was a story waiting to unfold, where the tension, the failure, and the seemingly impossible challenge would lead to an astonishing revelation. What no one in the Pentagon could have anticipated was that while they struggled with complicated methods and advanced systems, the answer was quietly waiting for someone with fresh eyes, a curious mind, and a different perspective to notice it. And when that would happen, it would not only solve the code but also remind everyone that talent and brilliance can emerge from the most unexpected places, changing everything in ways that no one could imagine. While the Pentagon was buzzing with tension, deadlines, and frustrated experts, no one expected the solution to come from someone so seemingly ordinary. Hidden in plain sight was a young girl whose life had nothing to do with codes, computers, or government intelligence. She was the daughter of a janitor who worked at one of the most secure and secretive buildings in the world. Her father, a humble man with a gentle demeanor, spent long hours cleaning offices, mopping floors, and maintaining the countless corridors that housed the nation's most sensitive information. To most people he was invisible, just another worker in a vast government machine. But for his daughter, his world was a universe of curiosity and quiet observation. The girl, perhaps no older than 12 or 13 at the time, was extraordinarily intelligent, not in the way that a classroom test might show, but in a way that was natural, intuitive, and creative. She had a mind that could see patterns where others saw chaos, and a patience that allowed her to focus on puzzles for hours without tiring. She loved riddles, brain teasers, and codes, not as a subject to study but as a challenge to conquer. Her room was filled with puzzles, scattered notes, and scribbles, remnants of a mind that was always active, always questioning, and always exploring. Unlike the Pentagon's experts who were trained to follow strict procedures and analyze problems systematically, she approached challenges differently. She followed instinct and curiosity, trusting her intuition in a way that made adults often underestimate her. Her connection to the Pentagon was indirect but significant. Visiting her father at work had been a routine for her since she could walk. While other children might find offices dull, she found them fascinating. She watched the people in suits move through hallways, typing on keyboards and examining documents with intensity. She noticed patterns in the way people worked, the order of things, the small details that no one else seemed to see. Her father, proud yet humble, often warned her not to wander too close to restricted areas, but even in her safe corners she absorbed information quietly. The environment of the Pentagon, filled with high-stakes intelligence and intricate operations, became an accidental classroom for her mind, sharpening her curiosity without her even realizing it. Despite her extraordinary mind, she lived a normal life outside the Pentagon's walls. She helped her father with chores, studied in her small room, and played like any other child. But what set her apart was a quiet hunger for understanding, an urge to make sense of the complex, the mysterious, and the seemingly impossible. While the experts inside the building were looking at codes as problems to be solved with rules and logic, she viewed them as puzzles meant to be explored, questioned, and approached differently. Her perspective was fresh, unconstrained by the rigidity of professional training. It was during one of her routine visits that she first noticed something unusual, a small glimpse of a complex string of symbols and numbers that had been left unattended, perhaps in a report her father was cleaning near. Most people would glance and move on, seeing only random gibberish. But for her, it was like a spark had ignited. Something in her mind recognized patterns where others saw confusion. She didn't yet know what it was or how important it could be, but she felt an unexplainable pull, a curiosity that demanded attention. She sat down quietly, examining it, turning the symbols over in her mind like puzzle pieces, thinking, testing, imagining connections. It was in this ordinary moment, during a routine visit and a small break from her life, that the extraordinary began. What made her unique wasn't just intelligence. It was perspective, patience, and the ability to think differently. She didn't see barriers, she saw possibilities. While the Pentagon experts were bogged down by rules, technology, and pressure, she had freedom, the freedom to explore, to experiment, and to make connections that others couldn't see. And in a world where assumptions often blind people to hidden truths, her outsider status became her greatest advantage. No one expected a janitor's daughter to do what the best-trained minds could not, which meant no one restricted her thinking. She had no fear of failure, no ego to protect, and no expectations from anyone, only curiosity, creativity, and a drive to understand. In that moment, the stage was set for the impossible. A child who lived quietly in the shadow of government corridors was about to accomplish what the Pentagon's top experts could not. Her story challenges everything we think about talent, intelligence, and opportunity. Sometimes, brilliance does not come from a title, a degree, or years of experience. Sometimes, it comes from a mind that sees differently, from someone who approaches the world without the filters of expectation or authority. And in her case, that unique combination of curiosity, perspective, and fearless experimentation was exactly what the world needed to unlock a mystery that had confounded the most brilliant minds. Little did anyone know, the janitor's daughter, unnoticed and underestimated, was about to change the course of intelligence history forever. Every day for the young girl began like any other, but little did anyone know, her ordinary routine was quietly shaping the path to something extraordinary. She would wake up early in her small, modest home, helping her father with chores before school. While other children might have groaned at sweeping floors or washing dishes, she moved with focus, learning discipline and patience from tasks that seemed mundane to most. These routines, though simple, sharpened her mind in ways that no classroom could teach. She had developed an ability to observe, to notice details, and to connect small pieces of information in ways that most people overlooked. After finishing her chores, she would prepare for school, but her thoughts rarely left the world of puzzles and patterns. She carried with her small notebooks filled with scribbles, codes, and observations, things she had noticed while wandering through her father's workplace or experimenting with her own problem-solving games. Each day at school was an extension of her quiet training. She noticed patterns in the way lessons were taught, connections between numbers, letters, and symbols, and she approached every assignment with curiosity rather than mere obligation. Teachers often called her attentive and unusually perceptive, though they could not fully explain the depth of her understanding. Her afternoons were reserved for the part of the day that would prove to be the most important: visits to the Pentagon. Her father, who had worked there for years, often allowed her to accompany him during his breaks. She did not enter classified rooms or touch confidential files, but just walking the hallways, observing the movement of people, and watching analysts at work gave her a unique exposure few children ever experienced. She noticed how analysts examined screens filled with streams of code, how they discussed patterns and anomalies, and how complex their work was. Where others might have been intimidated by the weight of secrecy and authority, she felt a strange sense of wonder. The corridors, buzzing with purpose and tension, were like a labyrinth of knowledge waiting to be explored. During these visits, she would often find a quiet corner to sit for a few minutes while her father worked. She would pull out her notebook and doodle patterns, write small codes, or test her own little puzzles, thinking about numbers and letters in ways adults rarely did. This simple act of observing and experimenting during breaks, seemingly insignificant at the time, would become the seed for her future breakthrough. Unlike the experts who were pressured to follow rigid procedures, she had the freedom to explore her curiosity at her own pace. No deadlines, no supervisors, no pressure, just a young mind thinking creatively. Even small encounters in her routine played a role in shaping her perspective. She noticed how analysts reacted when they found a breakthrough, how they debated theories, and even how they expressed frustration when faced with dead ends. These observations taught her lessons about problem-solving that books could never provide. She saw that intelligence alone was not enough. Patience, curiosity, and the ability to think differently were equally important. Every visit, every glance at a document, every whispered discussion in a hallway was a piece of the puzzle that she absorbed without anyone noticing. Her evenings were spent reflecting on what she had seen, often replaying moments from her day in her mind. She would experiment with ideas, test her own codes, and consider new patterns. While other children played games or watched television, she was quietly exercising her mind, building a mental library of problem-solving strategies. Her unique routine, a combination of ordinary tasks, careful observation, and imaginative exploration, was creating a foundation that no school or training program could provide. And then there were the breaks, moments she looked forward to more than anything else. While her father worked, she would wander to empty offices or quiet hallways, sometimes just sitting on a bench, other times sketching patterns on scraps of paper. It was during these brief, unassuming pauses that her mind worked most freely. She could think, experiment, and explore without interruption, connecting observations from her father's work environment with the puzzles she loved at home. These breaks were not just pauses from activity, they were creative incubators, the moments when inspiration struck, and where she unknowingly practiced the very skills that would one day allow her to solve the impossible code. Little did anyone realize that the combination of her ordinary daily routine, chores, school, quiet observation, and playful experimentation, was quietly preparing her for something no one at the Pentagon could imagine. Every sweep of the floor, every glance at a screen, every scribble in her notebook was a step toward solving a puzzle that experts had deemed unsolvable. Her daily life, simple and unremarkable on the surface, was a training ground for brilliance, showing that extraordinary talent often emerges from the most ordinary circumstances. And so, her routine, seemingly mundane to the outside world, was the secret engine that would power one of the most remarkable breakthroughs in intelligence history. While the Pentagon experts worked under immense pressure, she quietly developed the skills, patience, and insight that would allow her to see what others could not, proving that sometimes, greatness is hidden in the ordinary, waiting for the right moment to shine. It was an ordinary afternoon, much like any other in her routine, when the moment that would change everything quietly arrived. The young girl, the daughter of a janitor, had finished her chores and made her usual visit to the Pentagon, a place that had become almost like a second home to her. She wandered through familiar corridors, her small feet echoing softly against the polished floors, taking in the hum of computers and the quiet conversations of experts deeply focused on their work. To anyone else, it might have been just another busy hallway filled with people who seemed far beyond her reach. But to her, every detail was a clue, every movement a story, and every document a potential puzzle waiting to be explored. That day, as she walked past one of the offices her father cleaned, something caught her attention. It was a sheet of paper lying partly hidden under a stack of files on a desk. A page filled with strange symbols, numbers, and letters arranged in patterns that made no immediate sense. Her eyes, already trained by years of observing patterns in her puzzles and games, immediately recognized that this was something unusual. Most people would glance and think it was meaningless, but she felt a spark of curiosity ignite within her. There was something about the arrangement, the repetition of certain characters, the odd breaks and spacing. It felt like a challenge meant specifically for her to solve. She crouched down to get a closer look, careful not to be noticed. Her mind, always hungry for puzzles, began to race. She traced the symbols with her finger, imagining them as pieces of a giant jigsaw puzzle. She thought about codes she had seen in books, riddles she had solved, and patterns she had created herself. Her heart began to beat faster, not from fear but from excitement. This was the first moment she truly realized that what she was seeing was more than just random symbols. It was something purposeful, something complex, something designed to hide information in plain sight. For the first time, she felt the thrill of true discovery. She didn't know the full importance of the code or that the most powerful minds in the country had been struggling to decode it for months, but she understood instinctively that it was something significant. Her curiosity became a quiet obsession as she leaned closer, analyzing each line, each character, trying to understand the logic behind it. Unlike the experts who were burdened by pressure, procedures, and overcomplicated methods, she approached it with the freedom of imagination. She allowed herself to think outside the rules, to test wild ideas, and to follow intuition rather than protocol. Hours seemed to pass in minutes as she experimented with the code, testing patterns in her mind, writing small notes, and rearranging sequences on scraps of paper she found nearby. She noticed repetitions where others might have seen chaos, she guessed connections where others would have dismissed them as coincidence, and she allowed herself to imagine the logic behind the seemingly random symbols. This was not a moment of formal learning, but of pure intellectual adventure. It was the kind of curiosity that cannot be taught, the kind of genius that emerges naturally when a mind is allowed to explore freely. As the day progressed, she became increasingly absorbed. The experts in the building remained unaware of her presence, engrossed in their computers and discussions, frustrated by the lack of progress. They had complex formulas, advanced software, and years of training, yet the code remained unbroken. Meanwhile, she, without any tools or authority, continued to study, observe, and experiment, her mind racing with possibilities. She began to notice patterns that seemed to repeat at irregular intervals, sequences that aligned when viewed from a slightly different perspective, and relationships between symbols that others had overlooked entirely. Each small discovery fueled her determination, making the puzzle even more irresistible. What made her approach so unique was not just intelligence but perspective. She didn't think like an expert burdened by years of rigid training. She didn't see the code as a problem to be solved with rules. She saw it as a story to be understood, a pattern to be recognized, a challenge to be played with until it revealed itself. Her imagination and creativity, combined with her patience and attention to detail, allowed her to make connections that the experts, despite their brilliance, could not. While they approached the code with pressure, deadlines, and fear of failure, she approached it with curiosity, freedom, and joy, the most powerful combination of all. By the end of that day, she had already begun to make sense of fragments of the code, small glimpses that no one else had noticed. She didn't yet realize the full scope of what she was about to accomplish, but she knew instinctively that she had uncovered something extraordinary. It was the first spark of brilliance in a story that would astonish the nation, a moment when a curious mind met an impossible challenge and began to unravel it, piece by piece, quietly and without fanfare. In that seemingly ordinary afternoon, a janitor's daughter had taken her first step into history. The code, which had confounded the most brilliant minds in the Pentagon, had met someone who approached it not as an impossible obstacle, but as a puzzle to explore. And in that moment, the rules of expectation, status, and authority were quietly overturned, as the true power of curiosity, intuition, and an untrained mind began to shine. Little did anyone know, the simple act of noticing a forgotten piece of paper during a casual break would set in motion an extraordinary breakthrough, one that would prove that genius can appear where it is least expected, and that the brightest solutions sometimes come from the most overlooked minds. After days of quietly observing, experimenting, and puzzling over the strange symbols, the young girl began to feel a shift. The once intimidating, confusing code that had baffled even the Pentagon's top experts started to reveal patterns to her mind. It was not immediate and it was not simple. There were moments of frustration when nothing made sense, moments when she wanted to give up, and moments when the lines of numbers and letters seemed to mock her. But what others might have considered failure only fueled her determination. She had learned to embrace uncertainty as part of the puzzle, to trust her intuition, and to see connections that were invisible to those who approached the problem with rigid rules. Her breakthrough did not happen in a sudden flash as it often appears in stories. It happened gradually in small, careful steps, each discovery building upon the last. She began to notice sequences that repeated in irregular intervals, letters that seemed to correspond to numbers in ways that were unusual but consistent, and subtle shifts in patterns that no expert had noticed. Unlike the professionals who relied on formulas, computer programs, and conventional cryptographic methods, she allowed herself to think playfully, to experiment with ideas that seemed improbable, to test hypotheses without fear of being wrong. Her approach was fluid, flexible, and creative, qualities that are rare in a world obsessed with rules and protocols. She would often spend hours at her small corner, scribbling notes and drawing patterns in her notebook, connecting symbols with lines, highlighting sequences, and mentally testing possibilities. It was a delicate balance between patience and inspiration. Each time she found a clue, she felt a rush of excitement, a sense of validation, and yet she knew she had to continue, for one incomplete connection could ruin the understanding of the whole code. Her mind, trained through years of curiosity and playful problem-solving, worked tirelessly, untethered by expectations, hierarchy, or deadlines. And then, piece by piece, the code began to make sense. What had seemed like meaningless gibberish transformed into logic, sequences, and meaning. She discovered a pattern that repeated with subtle variations, a hidden key that unlocked the rest of the code. She traced these sequences carefully, checking and rechecking her work, ensuring that what she had found was not an accident or coincidence. Slowly but surely, she realized she could decode messages embedded in the symbols, revealing information that had remained inaccessible to the Pentagon's top analysts. The true brilliance of her breakthrough lay not in technical skill alone but in perspective. While the experts had approached the code as a mathematical problem to be solved with rules and software, she approached it as a story to be read, a puzzle to be explored, and a pattern to be discovered. Her lack of formal training, once considered a limitation, became her greatest advantage. She was not confined by assumptions or established methods. She could see what others could not because she was willing to think differently, to follow intuition, and to experiment fearlessly. It was during one of these moments of experimentation that she finally cracked the most complex section of the code. She aligned the sequences, recognized the hidden shifts, and traced the logic until it all fit together perfectly. Her heart pounded with excitement, not from pride but from the sheer thrill of discovery. The symbols on the page were no longer just marks on paper. They told a story, conveyed intelligence, and revealed secrets that the most brilliant minds had failed to uncover. She had done the impossible, quietly and without fanfare, proving that sometimes the sharpest insight comes from unexpected minds. When she realized what she had accomplished, she didn't shout or seek attention. She knew instinctively that her discovery was significant, but she also understood that patience and discretion were necessary. She returned to her observations, verifying her findings, testing each sequence multiple times, and ensuring that her breakthrough was accurate. This careful validation, combined with her intuition, ensured that when she finally revealed the results, there could be no doubt of her success. Meanwhile, the Pentagon's experts were still struggling. They had been working tirelessly, relying on sophisticated programs, teamwork, and advanced algorithms, yet the code remained locked. The contrast between their struggle and her quiet progress was stark. They had overlooked what she had noticed precisely because they were looking in the wrong way, confined by methods, assumptions, and pressure. Her breakthrough was a testament to the power of curiosity, imagination, and a fresh perspective, proving that rigid thinking often misses what a flexible mind can discover. By the end of this crucial stage, she had not only understood the code but had unlocked it entirely. The impossible was no longer impossible. The secrets hidden for months, the complex messages that had defied analysis, were now revealed, all because a young girl dared to approach the problem differently. Her breakthrough was not just a personal triumph. It was a moment that challenged the very assumptions of intelligence work, demonstrating that talent, creativity, and genius can emerge from the most unexpected places. In that quiet corner, far from the eyes of the Pentagon's most celebrated experts, history had been made. A janitor's daughter had achieved what the best-trained minds in the country could not. And in doing so, she reminded the world that brilliance is not always where it is expected, and that sometimes the simplest perspective can unlock the most complex mysteries. The breakthrough had happened quietly, without fanfare, in a corner of the Pentagon where no one thought to look. The young girl had deciphered what had been deemed uncrackable. Yet at first there was no immediate recognition. The analysts were still absorbed in their work, unaware that the very code they had struggled with for months had been unlocked. Her small notebook, filled with carefully traced patterns and validated sequences, remained in her possession, a silent testament to her brilliance. She knew the moment of revelation had to come, but she also understood that it had to be handled carefully. The recognition came unexpectedly. One afternoon her father, while tidying an office, noticed the notes she had been working on. He had always known she was sharp, but the pages he held were beyond anything he had imagined. The careful patterns, the sequences, the annotations, they formed a complete solution to a code that had baffled experts. He was stunned, a mixture of disbelief, pride, and awe flooding his thoughts. At first he hesitated, worried that revealing her work might cause trouble for both of them. But the significance of what she had accomplished was impossible to ignore. Slowly he realized that the only way to ensure her work was recognized, and that it could serve the country, was to bring it to the attention of those in charge. When the Pentagon analysts finally saw her work, their reaction was unlike anything anyone had expected. These were some of the most brilliant minds in the nation, people who had spent years cracking codes and solving intelligence mysteries. And yet, here was a young girl, a janitor's daughter, presenting a solution that they had not been able to achieve despite months of effort. Some of them laughed in disbelief at first, thinking it must be a mistake, a trick, or an exaggeration. But as they examined the sequences she had painstakingly decoded, as they traced her logic and confirmed her results, the disbelief turned into astonishment. Every detail matched, every pattern held true, and the code was undeniably solved. The room was filled with a mixture of shock, awe, and admiration. The analysts, who were used to solving impossible problems, found themselves humbled. Some shook their heads in amazement, others leaned back in their chairs, speechless. The brilliance of her work was undeniable. What struck them most was not just that she had solved the code, but how she had done it, through observation, intuition, creativity, and sheer persistence, without any formal training or the advanced tools they relied on. Her approach had been completely different, unbound by conventional thinking, and yet it had succeeded where all other methods had failed. Word of her achievement quickly spread within the Pentagon. Supervisors, directors, and even higher officials came to see the young girl and her work. Everyone wanted to understand how someone so young, so inexperienced in official intelligence work, had accomplished what their most seasoned experts could not. Meetings were held, and she was invited to explain her process. Despite her age and background, she calmly described how she noticed patterns, tested hypotheses, and followed her intuition. Her explanation, simple yet brilliant, revealed the depth of her understanding and the originality of her approach. Recognition, however, was not just about accolades or attention. It was about changing perspectives. The Pentagon had always valued formal training, advanced degrees, and years of experience, and while these were still important, her success demonstrated that genius could emerge from anywhere. Analysts began to rethink assumptions about talent and potential. They realized that brilliance could not be confined to credentials or status. In a world where expertise was measured by titles, her achievement was a revelation, a reminder that unconventional minds could achieve the extraordinary. For her, recognition was both humbling and empowering. She had never sought fame or rewards. Her motivation had been pure curiosity and the thrill of discovery. Yet, seeing the astonishment and respect from the experts, she understood that her work had impact far beyond her imagination. She was invited to continue contributing in ways that were previously unimaginable for someone of her age and background. The recognition also extended to the broader public once the story emerged, inspiring millions who learned that talent is not limited by circumstance, that opportunity can meet preparation in the most unexpected ways, and that intelligence can shine in the most unlikely places. In the end, the recognition of her achievement was not just about the code being solved. It was about breaking assumptions, challenging the status quo, and proving that brilliance can come from anyone, anywhere. A janitor's daughter had shown that determination, curiosity, and a unique perspective could overcome even the most formidable challenges. The experts who had once doubted anything outside their elite circle now looked at the world differently, forever changed by the insight of a young girl who had quietly, patiently, and brilliantly cracked the uncrackable. This moment of recognition was the turning point, not just for her but for everyone involved. It marked the moment when her talent was officially acknowledged, when her story became an inspiration, and when the impossible became possible, proving that true genius often appears where it is least expected. The moment her achievement became known, its effects rippled far beyond the quiet corners of the Pentagon. The young girl, a janitor's daughter whose life had once seemed ordinary and unremarkable, had done something extraordinary. Her breakthrough did more than solve a code. It challenged the very assumptions of what intelligence, skill, and brilliance truly meant. Analysts and officials were forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about talent. The rigid hierarchies of experience and formal education that had dominated the Pentagon were suddenly seen in a new light. If a young girl, largely untrained and overlooked, could crack a code that baffled the nation's top experts, then the potential for untapped talent everywhere became clear. The immediate impact within the Pentagon was profound. Teams that had once labored endlessly, frustrated by failure, now saw new possibilities. Analysts began to approach problems differently, inspired by the simplicity and ingenuity of her method. The breakthrough proved that fresh perspectives, creativity, and intuition could be just as powerful as years of training in complex technology. Departments that had once relied solely on established procedures started experimenting with new ways of encouraging unconventional thinking. Mentorship programs were rethought, hiring practices reconsidered, and pathways for overlooked talent were explored. Her work became a catalyst for innovation within one of the most traditional and rigid institutions in the world. Beyond the Pentagon, her story spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of the public, media, and educators. She became an emblem of possibility, showing that circumstances, background, age, or status do not define potential. News outlets shared her story, highlighting the astonishing fact that a child considered ordinary by society had achieved what the most brilliant minds could not. Social media erupted with admiration and inspiration, as millions around the world celebrated her intelligence, creativity, and determination. She became a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. Her impact also reached into education and mentorship. Teachers, parents, and leaders began to rethink how curiosity and talent were nurtured. Her story emphasized the importance of observation, patience, and creative problem-solving over rote memorization or standardized measures of intelligence. Schools started programs encouraging students to explore unconventional solutions, and organizations focused on innovation cited her achievement as a model of thinking differently. Suddenly, the world was reminded that genius is not always found in certificates, degrees, or job titles. It can appear in unexpected places, often where it is least expected. At a human level, her accomplishment resonated with people because it celebrated something deeply universal: the power of perseverance, curiosity, and believing in oneself. She had faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable, yet she persisted, guided only by her observation and her own creativity. Her story inspired countless others to approach problems with courage, to trust their instincts, and to recognize that solutions sometimes come from the simplest, most overlooked insights. Her journey became more than a tale of code breaking. It became a story of empowerment, proving that determination and originality can triumph over complexity and convention. Her achievement also had subtle but lasting effects on the intelligence community itself. Experts began to value unconventional thinking, encouraging teams to include diverse perspectives in solving complex problems. Workshops were designed to simulate her approach, combining curiosity, observation, and creative experimentation. Her breakthrough had not just solved a code, it had transformed a mindset. It reminded everyone that rigid thinking and over-reliance on process can blind even the most intelligent minds to solutions that are waiting to be discovered. In a broader sense, her story became a testament to the hidden potential in ordinary lives. The janitor's daughter, once invisible in the corridors of power, showed the world that extraordinary talent does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it is quiet, patient, and persistent, waiting for the right moment to reveal its brilliance. Her impact was both immediate and lasting. She solved the code, inspired millions, changed institutional thinking, and reminded humanity of a simple truth: that opportunity combined with curiosity can achieve the impossible. Ultimately, the real impact of her achievement was not just in cracking the code, but in changing the way people think about possibility. She proved that no one should ever be underestimated, that brilliance can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that even the smallest voices can make the largest difference. The Pentagon's experts, the intelligence community, and the wider world would never view talent in the same way again. Her story became a beacon of hope, a symbol of ingenuity, and a reminder that sometimes, the most extraordinary contributions come from the most ordinary individuals. As the story of the young girl spread beyond the Pentagon, it became clear that her journey was more than just a tale of code breaking. It was a story about human potential, perseverance, and the extraordinary power of curiosity. The janitor's daughter, once unseen and underestimated, had shown the world that brilliance does not always announce itself with titles, degrees, or experience. It can emerge quietly in the most unexpected places, and at the most unexpected times. Her life, once ordinary and routine, had intersected with one of the most complex challenges the nation had ever faced, and her mind, sharp, patient, and imaginative, had risen to meet it in a way that changed everything. The young girl's achievement left a lasting impression on everyone who learned of it. Experts who had once struggled with frustration now looked at her story with awe and humility. They realized that intelligence is not confined to classrooms or formal training, and that some of the greatest breakthroughs come from fresh perspectives, untethered by expectations or conventional methods. Her example became a symbol within the Pentagon and beyond, a reminder that sometimes solving the impossible requires thinking differently, taking risks, and trusting one's instincts. Her impact was felt not just in institutions or professional circles but in the hearts of people everywhere. Children, young adults, and adults alike were inspired by her story, understanding that circumstances, age, or background should never limit what one can achieve. People saw in her example that curiosity, patience, and determination are as powerful as knowledge and experience. Her story became a beacon of hope for the overlooked and underestimated, proving that greatness often hides where no one expects it, quietly waiting for someone to notice and nurture it. For the young girl herself, the recognition was humbling but transformative. She had accomplished something that changed the course of national security and reshaped the way intelligence work was perceived. Yet, she remained grounded, never letting fame or admiration distract her from the values that had guided her: curiosity, observation, creativity, and persistence. She continued to explore, learn, and grow, understanding that the true reward was not applause but the satisfaction of solving a challenge that had once seemed impossible. Her journey showed that genius is not about seeking attention but about quietly embracing problems, thinking differently, and pursuing understanding relentlessly. The conclusion of her story also carried an important lesson for the world. Brilliance can be hidden in the most ordinary lives. It can be the mind of a child, the insight of someone overlooked, or the perspective of a person outside the expected circle. The world often assumes that solutions must come from experts or those in power, but her story proved otherwise. Talent and ingenuity do not always follow social hierarchies or professional credentials. They follow curiosity, creativity, and courage. This lesson resonated across industries, schools, and homes, inspiring a new appreciation for unconventional thinking and the untapped potential in everyday lives. Her legacy extended beyond the Pentagon and beyond the code she solved. It became a story about empowerment, breaking barriers, and redefining expectations. The young girl had shown that with determination, observation, and a willingness to explore the unknown, anyone can make an extraordinary impact. Her life became a testament to the idea that no one should be underestimated, and that the smallest, quietest voices sometimes carry the power to change the world. In the end, the story of the janitor's daughter is not only a story of cracking a foreign code, it is a story of courage, brilliance, and human potential. It is a story that reminds us that sometimes, the most extraordinary achievements come from the most ordinary people. Her journey teaches us that curiosity and persistence, combined with a willingness to think differently, can unlock the most impossible challenges. It reminds the world to look beyond appearances, to value fresh perspectives, and to recognize that genius often comes in unexpected forms. And so, the legacy of the young girl lives on, not just in the solution she provided or the accolades she received, but in the inspiration she instilled. She showed that brilliance knows no boundaries, that curiosity can conquer impossibility, and that even the most overlooked individuals can leave a lasting mark on the world. Her story is a timeless reminder that potential exists everywhere, and that greatness often appears quietly, waiting for the right moment, and the right mind, to bring it to light.